So I'm going to cover in this first session, sort of give you a background for what we'll now cover in the second session about stress, brain, and memory. I'm going to cover 5 different brain areas, okay, with very different functions, all related to how we process information. So the first one is the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus at the base of the brain is our most primitive part of the brain. It is basically a part of the human brain that has not changed much in millions of years. The hypothalamus you'll see in reptiles and birds and humans. It is incredibly primitive, and it makes sure we survive. That's its primary function. And so we think of the hypothalamus in terms of the 4 F's. Okay? This is a mnemonic to remember hypothalamus function. The first is fighting. And the way to think about this is when you are angry and you want to lash out at someone, and you're feeling really hostile, that is your hypothalamus that has intense activation. And you can artificially induce an animal to be aggressive just by electrically stimulating its hypothalamus. So this is raw anger in which you feel like you want to express this anger at someone. Second F is feeding. And so the hypothalamus is critical for controlling our feeding. When you feel so hungry and you are looking at the ice cream and the French fries and the cheeseburger, it is your hypothalamus that is commanding you to eat that, okay? Because it is so rich in calories. It is saying to you, tomorrow you could be dead. There might never be any food again after this meal. So you need to eat not only one, but all the French fries. Okay? That's your hypothalamus that's talking to you. The third F is fleeing, which also goes with fear and freezing. And so these 3 F's actually all go together with intense fear. And so when we are afraid, the hypothalamus gives us an overwhelming feeling that you could die. There's actually a part of the hypothalamus that actually enables you to feel like you can die. And so this feeling that you could die, you must flee, this comes also from the hypothalamus. And the 4th F, well, the 4th F, I'm going to leave a bit to your imagination. This is a family kind of affair, and you never know who's watching. So I want to leave that to your imagination. I have shown you pictures of each F, which I also want to somewhat leave to your imagination. And we actually have a form of dementia in which you see here, right here, this is activation in the frontal cortex, which shows when we're making decisions in the normal healthy brain. There's a form of dementia in which you have chronic inactivation of the frontal cortex. And people who don't have a normal functioning frontal cortex with this diagnosis of frontal dementia, they completely lose inhibition. They do things that they know are wrong. I mean, there are examples. A patient may actually get out of a moving car. The car is moving along at 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, and they just step out of the car. They know it's wrong, but they don't care. So this is what's so important about frontal cortex. It allows you to think about the consequences of your action, and people who have impaired functioning of the frontal cortex don't have that kind of control. So in thinking about these 2 brain structures, think about how they compete against each other. They have different motivation, different drive. Hypothalamus, pure emotion and drive. Prefrontal cortex is that voice, basically saying, this is not a good idea. You need to think about the consequences of your actions. Next structure is the one that I've spent much of my career studying, the hippocampus. Absolutely crucial structure about processing the details of our lives. So here what we have is we're going to look in the brain of someone who is processing information. So as you look in and you are scanning the brain, you see activation of the hippocampus when a person is learning new information. Basically, that is the function of the hippocampus, to enable us to learn new facts. Everything you are learning here today absolutely requires your hippocampus. To be able to remember anything that happened today, you must have a functioning hippocampus. All the details and events of our lives. require the hippocampus. And it's a very deep and very primitive brain structure that has just this one function, and that's memory. And it is the hippocampus that gets impaired. That's the first structure to go in Alzheimer's disease. And so we know that, in a sense, it's like Phineas Gage, which we had an individual referred to as HM about 60 years ago. And HM had epilepsy, which could not be controlled by the medication at the time. So here you see a normal hippocampus, which is this gray area, and they went in and selectively removed this hippocampus. So the reason why it's black is there's only fluid there. They took out his hippocampus. HM was completely normal. You could have a conversation with him. He could have absolutely everything. His personality was the same. The only thing that was different about HM was that he couldn't form new memories. Essentially, time stopped for HM in the 1950s. He lived only until a few years ago. But nothing that happened since the 1950s was able to be stored in his memory. Now, we have a good idea as to how hippocampus is able to form these memories. In part, it's because the hippocampus is about the only part of the brain that makes new brain cells.